Thank you everybody for coming out and taking a look at what's new in the IMAGINiT Clarity 2023.1 product. We're very excited to have some new things to show you this fall. So in terms of an agenda for what we'll go through, we traditionally go through just a quick release history and just show that we're still on the path, and we'll talk about Clarity 2023.1 release and what it's all about. And in particular, there's a few different theme areas that we'll focus on, including project template-ization. We'll talk about task management, some project management features, unified sync task that we're very excited about, some enhancements around data and reporting, and then some enhancements around our space programming module. So that's where we're going with our agenda today. Talking about the history of Clarity, Clarity actually goes back to, I think, 2011 was our first release, but we've generally stayed on a 2 releases per year sort of release cadence, and we do that in order to stay responsive to customers and what they would like to see from us. So we very much encourage you to continue to send your ideas, your feedback, whether it's directly to us or through the support center or via the imaginit.helprace.com portal. We look at all of those kinds of data as we decide what to do in each new release, and we're already planning and working on our spring release for Clarity 2024. But yes, as you can see, we normally have a spring release that supports the new version of Revit and Revit Server and that sort of thing, and then a fall release that's really just nothing but feature enhancements. And that continues on through this year. We released Clarity 2023.1. I think people got the email notification about it on December 1st. So it is out there and available. You should be able to download it now. The person inside your organization that's associated with your licenses would have gotten an email notification about how to download and install the new version. In terms of Revit and Revit Server version support, we are supporting in Clarity 2023.1 and 0.0 for that matter, Revit 2023 all the way back to Revit 2019. So that's 5 versions, and we have some ability to run Revit 2018 by having an older task server installed. So you would keep a version of the task server that's a 2022.1 version, but that is still able to connect up to a more recent Clarity host, and that machine would be able to run 2018 up through 2022. So we've been supporting 5 releases, and we think we'll keep going with that. We hope that that is still a reasonable range and a reasonable number for people. But we do expect that that come the spring, when Clarity 2024 comes out, that we will probably drop support for Revit 2019 at that time. So hopefully that continues to be an acceptable sort of life cycle for our Revit support. So let's talk about some of the features that we've added in the 2023.1 release. So the first area that I'd like to talk about is project template-ization. And this really goes back to a collection of requests that people have had for a long time with Clarity. The biggest and most probably prevalent of them is that whether the project is a network folder-based project or not, or whether it's BIM 360, there's some location in your network where you use to store the files related to that project. And that location should be the default location where things get copied to, any tasks that produce things or whatever it might be. So the ongoing question that people asked was, can I just set up a network folder that says, this is where I want you to put files for this particular project? And we finally accomplished that by this mechanism. We kind of took inspiration from Microsoft in a couple of their web-based products and we made what we're calling project parameters. So these project parameters are added to all of your projects during project create or editing of the project, and you can define in the server section what the standards are. Anything that should always be added to every project, but each individual project is also able to add additional bits of information. So in this case, you can see we've added a parameter to the project called network folder, BIM coordinator's email, that kind of thing. And so these will be the defaults that we'll see when we go to add them. Now, the benefit to this is once these have been assigned on a per project level, they are now usable in tasks, any place where you're being asked for like a folder path, anytime, post-task action, use in data sheets, use in project messages. Those are all the places that we could come up to use them, and they're used in this format where it's square braces and Clarity Project : the parameter name. But you can use them in that way because we had a lot of people tell us that that the templatized approach that we had was nice and all, but they still needed to go in after any project got created. They needed to go in and adjust things like where's the folder that this is being sent to. So they had to go into a bunch of tasks and make adjustments. Our hope is that this really makes your template project fully templatized so that you can use these project parameters in your template and you won't need to change anything at all after creating the project. You'll just fill in these things up front. And so it looks something like this, where during the project add or later during the project edit, there's just another section that populates in any parameters that you want people to fill in, and you can add additional ones on the fly if you'd like. So we're really excited about seeing how people use that and excited to knock off a long-standing sort of request for people that wanted to templatize their projects a little bit better than what we supported in the past. So moving forward to the next area, task management. This goes back to something that we spent time here and there on support calls with people who had very specific kind of problem with their tasks. Mostly the kind of examples that we list out here below, where people were pointing a bunch of tasks to to a particular server location, and that server location was going away, and it was going to be challenging to track down all the tasks that were pointing to that server location and change all of them. And then the second scenario was wanting to push changes to all the different tasks with some new standard that people had. Like at some point, some people discovered the max wait time between sheets for PDF. For some people, that's an important number. I think it defaults to 1 second of wait time. But if you use Adobe or Bluebeam, sometimes a bigger number is appropriate. And people might have 100 or 200 tasks out there before they discover that really if they push it up to a number like 30, then it saves them having to deal with it. And so in our support cases that we had with issues like this, we generally had to get into the database and give people SQL commands to run against the database to make these kinds of changes. And that's something that's painful, that you guys can't usually do it yourself, or that we have to sort of walk you through that process. And it happened enough that we felt like we ought to take a crack at solving this inside the product. And so we have a new section. It's only available to administrators, and it's called Task Management. And the idea is that you can run queries across all of your tasks in all the projects that you can see. and you can search down as far as the task parameter level or specific task values. Do a find, and then in looking at those results, you have options to do things like delete all the tasks that you found that match those criteria, or search for any occurrence of a particular piece of text and replace it with some other piece of text, or update the values. I want maximum wait time per sheet to be pushed to a 30 on every task. So all those kinds of things are possible, and it no longer requires going into the database and coordinating with our support department to make those kinds of changes. We do, I think, call out that this is slightly dangerous as an operation, so you should definitely do it with extreme caution, and perhaps with making a backup of your database first before you start doing that kind of thing. But we have now given you some scissors that you can run with, and hopefully be made more powerful with those scissors. So now let's talk about project lifecycle management. Oh boy, do not reboot. Thank you for that. Project lifecycle management in Clarity, we got a number of our larger customers that said, in particular after we added the feature that new projects created in BIM 360 would be automatically created in projects in a Clarity project, but that no one was really sort of taking responsibility for shutting down a project later on. And so in some cases, people had task schedules that were still running, even though the projects were not really active, and it was taking up time on the task servers because there's no real reason for you to still be making PDFs on a project that's been done for 6 months or more. And so in order to help this kind of issue, we have a new server setting option where you can auto deactivate projects based on inactivity. So we'll be watching the last modified date on all of the models that you can see on the project homepage. And once a day, we'll check and see, are there models or are there projects where none of the models have changed in the last X number of days? You pick what X is, and if so, let's deactivate that project. So it's not deleted; it's just deactivated. You can still get into it. You can still reactivate it inside of Clarity, but this will turn it off so that it's not filling up your project homepage. It's not running tasks on deactivated projects. So generally, it's just a way to keep things nice and clean in the number of projects that you have available. But it's still opt-in. It's off by default. All right. So moving into Unified Sync, this is a new task that we're offering, and we expect it to continue to grow. If you've used Clarity for file synchronization kind of tasks or file download kind of tasks in the past, you might have noticed that we have, I don't know what that is. Is that 12 different tasks that we're all doing various kinds of file synchronization? And then if you wanted to actually move files from one system to the other, we were kind of inconsistent. Some of them supported some amount of moving directly files from one system into another. In other cases, you had to download them to a network folder and then set up a post action that would do an upload to someplace else, or maybe a task sequence to do a download here and an upload there. And it really just felt a very duct tape kind of thing when it talked about moving files from one system to another. And we really wanted to make that something that was really more purpose-built and and less a bunch of individual pieces that you had to, we'd say, Rube Goldberg together a machine that would do what you wanted. So Unified Sync is our attempt to do that, to standardize all the different places that we can work with, and to be able to easily define what you want to move and how, and have a completely consistent list of capabilities to do any of those things. So Unified Sync is a new task. You select on the left side or the right side what system you're working with on the left side, what system you're working with on the right side, and whether you're doing a backup just in one direction or whether you're doing a synchronize both directions. And depending on what you select, it will make appropriate options available. We support everything from sort of propagating deletes. We support metadata options, empty folders, all of the different options that we've supported in all of these. We've added support for. And we didn't get to all of the different systems, covering all 12 of the tasks. So what we're supporting in this first version of Unified Sync is these specific sort of file synchronization providers, if you will. So I anticipate that in the next version we'll cover all the rest of them, and and we're sort of happy to be providing something that's more friendly, more clear, and less less sort of feels like something tricky to accomplish, something that's straightforward for what people want, which is moving files from one place to another, or synchronizing files back and forth, whatever option that is. Moving forward into the data enhancements side of things, I think we've talked for a couple years about our integration to let power users have easier access to Clarity data that has been extracted from Revit inside of things like Power BI or Excel or Tableau, those kinds of places via a technology called OData. OData just gives you a link, and then with that link, you can paste that link into those tools and have very quick access to, here's the data for my project, and being able to pull in whatever data is appropriate and make the charts or graphs or dashboards that you'd like to see. So OData has been something that we've had for a while, but you did not have access to all of the tables. I think we extract, for our project databases, we extract about 230 different tables worth of data. And actually, I say that without knowing actually where we were or where we've gotten to. But I think that we did add support for perhaps another 30 tables in this newest release. So we're getting caught up so that OData can do all of the things that that you can with a pure SQL connection. So yeah, just trying to give more people more ability to be able to query and use your Clarity extracted data in whatever form you'd like to, in a dashboard or that kind of thing. Another thing on the data enhancement side, BIM 360 is supported for a couple of years now, this concept of a data extraction task. You had to have an executive role within the BIM 360 account to be able to do it, and historically it was only something that could be run at the account level. So Clarity has had it for a year or two, but it was kind of buried because it couldn't be set up as part of a project. It could only be set up as a server-based task and managed at the server level. And the idea behind it is that you specify a particular hub, and it will go down and into that hub and download CSV files for all of these different BIM 360 concepts. So you'll wind up with a bunch of CSV files, and you can use those with tools like Power BI to be able to look at things like how many issues do we have, and are the number of issues getting smaller, and that kind of thing. So what's new is that Autodesk has opened this up a little bit more and let us run it on a project-specific basis. which is exciting because now we can, I think, have more people have access to it and see that it's available and useful. And really all Clarity is doing is just coordinating this for you. You can schedule it through Clarity. Clarity will take care of kicking off the data extraction task from BIM 360, capturing the results, downloading them, unzipping them, putting them into wherever you'd like to have them, so that your Power BI just updates instantly when you open it next. All right, so that's this kind of data enhancement. Another data enhancement that I was going to talk about was related to traditionally how Clarity dealt with a bidirectional data changing workflow. So going back a large number of years in Clarity, we had the mechanism to export data out to a project database and then bring up the data in a data sheet or in a report or something like that. And if you wanted to give access so that people were able to look at the data, see something that was wrong, and make changes, and have those changes flow back to Revit, we had that capability for a long time. And the traditional way that we dealt with that was we felt like if there's a chance that people are non-Revit users that are going to be making these change requests, perhaps we ought to have a Revit user sort of eyeball the requested changes and accept or reject them before they just happen. So in order to make this happen, when you made a change in a data sheet or in a report, a designated user on the project was notified. The user opened up the model in Revit and said, show me the requested changes, and chose accept or reject those changes. The user still had to do a sync to central to make the change official, and then you went back through the Revit database export side of things, and then things were actually updated in the data. So it was a long sort of workflow, and it had a designer involved in making sure that the changes were acceptable. But we did actually have some customers where they were Revit users who were making the changes. They just liked making the changes in the data sheet kind of environment because you were looking at pieces of equipment one by one or rooms one by one. And they were kind of annoyed that they had to make it and then they had to go over to Revit and they had to approve their own change and that kind of thing. So we wanted to make it at least an option that you could have a Clarity task that would go through and do this kind of operation. So now we have an option for if you make the changes in the data sheet, you can kick off a task that will go in and accept or reject those changes for you inside of Revit, and you can kick off the database export and basically do this all as one big action rather than something where where we have to get an extra user involved. So your choice as to whether you use it, but we just didn't want to force people to be using things in the original way that we envisioned them. All right, moving forward to space programming enhancements. Clarity Space Programming is a module that's been out for 1 year now, and it's targeted at architects who do early stage space programming kind of and planning operations, sometimes before the Revit model even exists. And since the beginning, we've been giving demonstrations of it. We've had a lot of people asking, can I take a finished design and make a space program from it? And I don't know if that's something where it's often a retrofit kind of situation or just a good starting point for the next design is the last close design. But we've bowed to pressure, and we now have a mechanism that inside of Revit you can say, I want to take the existing Revit model and I want to push, I either want to create a new space program or perhaps I've just made some changes during my schematic design and know that we need some more rooms. So let me push those updates into an existing space program from the Revit model. And it deals with the different approaches that people take about whether programs are sort of one-to-one with rooms or one-to-many. It deals with whether programs are explicit about things like which level particular spaces are on, or whether it's any place that the designer makes it work is good. So we're flexible on how that data gets pushed into a program and support the different options. Let's see, on the FF&E side of things, if you have spreadsheets or something like that, use SEPs to BIM or SEPs to define what pieces of equipment need to go into what type of room, we now finally have an option inside of the Clarity Space program to import or export those FF&E items from a spreadsheet, instead of having to do it either by adding them manually, or we did have an API for it previously, but yeah, now if you've got the spreadsheet with the room contents, we can import that in and get that data into Clarity more easily. So beyond the space programming and everything else that we've listed, there's a bunch of small enhancements that we would say don't fit into a nice category, but we think are actually important for people as well. I know that a variety of people have been asking us about improving the launchable tasks capability, and in particular, being able to customize which models are targeted when you launch a task. And so that's now a new option where you can say that this task has customizable targets. This is another one where we've sort of bowed to pressure. It's less of a feature and more just an FYI that we have renamed the publish Revit model task to transmit Revit model. Publish Revit model, we called it this going back to 2012 or thereabouts, when we were talking about pulling files out of Revit server and putting them on disk so that you could work with them that way. But over time, and especially with BIM 360, publish has come to mean a different thing. And so just the amount of confusion kept on growing. And so we finally bowed to pressure and we've renamed it to transmit Revit model. It should be otherwise transparent to you in terms of a change. Let's see, we've got different UI components to make it easier to navigate Clarity into BIM 360 docs. We've changed optionally the way that editing a new task works. For project-wise, we had some issues around handling XREFs in AutoCAD and being able to run AutoCAD tasks. Some UI improvements that people asked for that we took care of, and some further database export. So making a little bit more information in the database just to be able to support the things that people wanted to see. So, and there's more than this. I just ran out of time to pull all these little changes that also got rolled into 2023.1. If you're existing Clarity customers, thank you for your ongoing support. We continue to hope to be worthy of keeping going with Clarity, and I would definitely do encourage you to interact with us, interact with other people on the IMAGINiT.helprace.com portal. That's something that actually, if you go into your Clarity screen, it's up on the feedback link up in the upper right corner. I encourage you to work with the community and work with us here. Also work with us directly. And if you're not an existing Clarity customer and then this has made you more interested, please reach out and we'll set up a demo to look more deeply.